Welcome back to Cruder.com. In this next video on NameManager, we're going to take another look at creating intuitive formulas using another real-life example. In this example, we're going to start by making this table a named range. And to do that, we're simply just going to select it, hit Control-Shift and over and down to select the entire range, or just select it with your cursor, and then type Sport List and hit Enter. So now this whole range will be referred to as Sport List instead of B4:C14. So what's cool about that is that if I apply data validation to this cell right here by just going to the Data tab, Data Validation, and then saying I want to have a list of values, and that list of values that I want to look up from is this static range of soccer through football. So what I mean by static is that it's always going to be this range here. It's never going to go any further. So if there's another sport, I'll have to come in here and update this list to B15. So for now, I'm just going to hit OK, and then I'm going to choose something like cricket. So for cricket, I want to do a Vlookup formula where, depending on whatever this value is, I want the Vlookup formula to return the quantity of the worldwide fans here. So I'm going to say equals Vlookup, and the lookup value is cricket. And my table array, now instead of going over here and just selecting over and down, I'm going to type Sport List. And even there, Excel realizes that this is called Sport List. But when you're typing it, it should just be much easier to just type Sport List, or type out a portion of it and hit Tab. Say comma, the second column is what I want returned, and comma again, false or 0 to get the exact match. Hit Enter, and we get 2.5 billion. Now we can switch this to anything and it should work dynamically. But what if we add in swimming, and we just say that there's 300 million people who are fans of this sport? Now if I go back into this VLOOKUP in the dropdown, my data validation only stops at football. Just like I said, it's a static range where I need to then go back into data validation to get back to this window to then update this to 15. Well, that's kind of crazy. I mean, I don't really want to do that all the time and have to update that every time I get a new sport. So instead, I'm going to go ahead and type a new formula that I haven't spoken about, and it's called the offset formula. And right here, Excel tells us that it returns a reference to a range that is a given number of rows and columns for a given reference. So what it's basically saying is take a reference, say this one, B5, soccer, and say, do I want to offset that by anything? Do I want to go, it's talking about rows right now, so do I want to go down in the rows or up in the rows? Meaning, do I want to go down 1, which would mean I would start on cricket, or -1, which would mean I'd start on Sport List? I don't want to go up or down. I want to stay on soccer, so I'm going to hit 0. And then do I want to offset it to the right or the left using my columns? So if I said offset 1 column, that would say started at worldwide fans for this referenced range. But I don't want to do that. And again, if I did -1, it would go back to column A. So I'm going to say it's 0 because I want column B and I want it to start on soccer. But now what about the height? The height is what I want it to always be dynamic and changing based on if I add an additional sport. So with this, I want Excel to count how many are in my list and then say I want to have a referenced range as big as this list so that I don't have to update it from B14 to B15 to B16 within my data validation every time I add a new sport. So I'm going to use the count A formula, which tells Excel to count the number of cells in a range that are not empty. So everything in this range right here that's not empty, go ahead and count it up. And I'm going to say the value that I wanted to start at counting is B5. I'm just going to hit a colon so that Excel returns another B5. I'm going to put a 0 to make 50. So I don't really think I'm going to add more than 50 sports here, but obviously if I did, then I'd have to update this formula to maybe 500 or so. But if I go ahead and I add an additional sport to the bottom, then this cell is no longer blank, and Excel will count it within this formula, therefore extending my offset range. So I'm just going to close it up here with 2 closing parentheses and hit Enter, and I get baseball, and that's only because I'm here on the baseball row. So let's pop in here with F2 and just verify this one last time and hit F9 to evaluate the formula. and Excel returns an array of values from soccer all the way through swimming. So this is perfect. This is exactly what I'm looking for. I'm going to press Control Z, but before we go ahead and use it, I need to actually lock up my range. So I'm going to highlight over this, hit F4 to lock it up, and then I come into this reference on B5, and I'm lock it up as well with F4, and go to the end, hold Shift and Home, Control C to copy the entire formula, including the equal sign, hit Escape. Now we're ready to update this data validation. To do this, we're going to go into Data, Data Validation, and replace this source with that formula, Control V, and hit OK. Now let's delete this guy, and as you can see in the drop down, now we have swimming. If I type another sport, let's just type Excel as a sport, and let's pop in here. Excel is now in the list because it's now a part of this range. It's no longer blank, and it's counting it within that offset formula. So I'm going to delete this, but what would be even easier is if we could put that offset formula that we typed here, take this formula and put it in a named range, and then reference that named range in the data validation. So we could do this as well. So I'm going to hit OK, and then I'm going to hit Control F3 to pop into the name manager. I'm going to create a new name, which is going to be called Sports, and I'm going to have the scope so that it's only able to be used on this tab, NameManager-1, and it refers to this formula, this offset formula. And I'm just going to press OK and close, and then go back into data validation within this lookup here. So data validation, and instead of putting the formula there, I'm just going to say equals sports and hit OK. And Excel is now doing the exact same thing, so nothing changed. I'm just using a defined name instead of that formula now. So if I come back down here and put Excel, you can see that it should now be in the list as it is here.